All right. Terence Crawford tells Bob Arum, hey, man, you're going to have to pay me for these to fight a boxer, another fighter with no crowd. You know that those are conversations going on with promoters about having boxing matches with no fans in attendance. That would affect Terence Crawford, and he had something to say about it. Let's talk about that in this video. All right, welcome back. Terence Bud Crawford, one of my favorite fighters, pound for pound, number one fighter in the world, number two welterweight. Don't get it crazy. Don't get crazy now. You know who I think the best welterweight is, and that is Errol Spence Jr. But hey, man, there's a chance I could be wrong. I don't think I'm wrong, but there's a chance I could be wrong. But Terence Crawford, in my opinion, is the pound for pound number one guy on my list, and a guy I truly enjoy watching fight and can't wait to see fight again. So this was interesting to me when it came out on, I think it was actually Boxing Scene that I got this from, where Terence Crawford was asked about a proposal, or, you know, not necessarily a proposal, but one of the ideas that are being bandied about by Bob Arum, by, you know, the guys from Dana White in the UFC, Eddie Hearn. I'm not heard if Al Heyman and the PBC have considered doing it, or if Oscar De La Hoya has considered doing it. But that is holding fights between fighters where there are no fans. Now, the reason why you would do that is that if there are no fans, there's a lot less likelihood that anybody is going to contract the virus that has us all in quarantine. But yet, if in that controlled environment, boxing fans would still have the ability to watch boxing. New fights that are coming up. Obviously, right now we got so many, historical fights that you can go check out and watch, and that, if you want to watch boxing, you can still watch a good fight every day of the week up until the end of the year. But that doesn't mean, but that's not the same as, as a live fight. So these guys are considering having these live fights. Now, Terence Crawford was asked about it, and he said, that he hadn't heard about it, but he immediately red flagged the problem for him, and that was that they're going to have to pay him more money. Because he said, look, and I was like, well, why in the world would they have to pay you more money to fight in a crowd full of empty people? That's, a stadium, or, fight where there are no people in there. Why would they have to pay you more money for that? Now, he answers the question. That's because he and other fighters that are in his level get a cut of the ticket sales. So he's saying, since he gets a cut of the ticket sales and the ticket sales aren't going to be there, then the promoter's going to have to pay up front, give him his money to make up for that. Otherwise, hey man, no fight. Now that's a very, very interesting thing there, right? Right there, because that would make it more expensive it makes it more expensive for the promoter to do that, because there is the only thing that you would be revenue for that fight would be from the fees that you would get from from whoever's airing the fight, right? Whether the licensing fee that's paid by ESPN in the case of Terence Crawford, in the case of Terence Crawford and Top Rank. So, my thing would be, though, if that was me, I would say, man, that's a good opportunity to renegotiate your contract. That's the opportunity that presents, because you say, okay, you want to fight me in no crowds. That's cool. How about this? I need a greater percentage of the rights to the fight. So you can know, that's how I think that Terence Crawford could overcome that issue pretty quickly. If Bob Arum is willing to do it, you know what I mean? If Bob Arum is willing to say, okay, well, I get X amount of money for the fee from ESPN to air the fight. I'll just cut off a piece of that to make up for the fact that I can't get you money from ticket sales. Now, the other thing, though, Bob Arum could say is, look, I don't get money from ticket sales either. So we both get paid on ticket sales. Everybody gets paid on ticket sales. So if I don't get my ticket sales and you can't get your ticket sales, then it's a wash. We're both making less money. We both know we're making less money. So let's just make it happen so we can get these fights done, right? Now, but for a fighter like Terence Crawford, though, if a guy is sitting on $3 million, if a guy is sitting on $3 million or sitting on $5 million or however much money he made on his last fights, and he can afford to sit there and wait, then hey man, sit there and wait, right? Especially for if it's going to be like a really big fight, right? If it's a fight against a Danny Garcia, or if it's a fight against a Sean Porter or Errol Spence Jr., if you do that, then you just sit and wait. But even then, the answer to that, I think, is pay-per-view. So it's just a real crazy situation going on right now. It's just a real crazy situation going on here, man, with trying to get boxing back up and running. If you're going to have to reschedule, if you have to renegotiate contracts for big fighters to ensure that they get a bigger piece of the license. I think you call it the licensing fees that are paid. That it just could make it a situation where somebody's going to lose money. And in any of those circumstances, that can make people walk away from it. The other option is that maybe the network is willing to pay a little bit of extra money because they would be able to get live sports. So if ESPN said, yeah, okay, well, we know that we want to have live sports on our network. Because they feel like they could get greater advertisement if they had a live sporting event that people could turn around and watch, that people could watch, that it might be in their interest to increase the fees that they pay to Top Rank or something like that. I think that there's ways that you can get around and make everybody happy. But more than likely, if that was the scenario, the fighter is going to have to give up something. Right? Because everybody else is giving up something. And I have a suspicion that eventually Terence Crawford would give into that and go ahead and take the fight. But it just goes to show you, man, that this situation that we're in can really radically change the way that boxing, man. Could you imagine if this stuff goes you're going to have guys, we are in month 2. We're in month 2 of this, right? So you're going to have a whole bunch of, smaller promoters that can't put on shows. Those smaller promoters that can't put on shows may never come back. You could have boxers. You have boxers who are contenders, or older boxers. Older boxers who are fighting at one weight class. They can't fight for 6 or 8 months, and all of a sudden now they've grown up and they have to fight in another weight class. This thing is it's just going to be really, really interesting to see how all this stuff pans out. But one thing I know for sure is that Bob Arum ain't making any fights, and Bob Arum ain't doing anything that's going to have Bob Arum losing money to make fights. And if that's Terence Crawford's opinion and that's Bob Arum's opinion, then hey man, they both got solid points. But we as boxing fans are going to be the ones that are going to suffer from that. Now, the fights that Bob Arum actually is talking about making with Bob Arum. Bob Arum is willing to make for Terence Crawford. The 2 fights that I hear are the most realistic are the Teixeira fight for the WBO 154-pound title, and Kell Brook for the 147-pound fight that Terence Crawford already has. The problem with the Kell Brook problem is, though, that similar to all this other stuff, that if you can't, I don't think there's any likelihood of Terence Crawford fighting Kell Brook in a crowd where there is no fans, because that would mean that they would both have to be in the same, that in order for them to have to do that means the quarantine would still have to be on. And since the quarantine is still on, that tells you that people are not going to be traveling from one country. They're not traveling from one country to another country. So because the borders are cut off. And if you do, you've got like 14 days, month-long quarantines. So when you go over there, you're not going to necessarily be able to train the way that you want to. It would take a lot of lead time, and also consequently, it would make the fight itself more expensive because of all the time that one fighter or the other would have to spend in that other country. But most likely, they're just not going to be able to go between the two. So the fight that could happen would be the Teixeira fight. The Teixeira fight would be at 154 pounds. I just don't, man, to tell you the truth, what I think is going to happen is the following. None of these fights are going to be taking place. No big fight is going to be taking place, in a fight, in a situation where there is no crowd. The people that might be able to do that are the lower level fighters, contenders, maybe some champions like a Navrati, somebody at that level. But I wouldn't expect to see, Terence Crawford, Manny Pacquiao, Errol Spence, Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder's rematch, Canelo. I just wouldn't expect to see those guys fight under with no crowd unless the networks themselves were willing to foot that extra amount of money that these guys get for selling the tickets. So, but anyway, but then again, maybe if they don't make as much money, they have to make more fights like they did back in the old days when you didn't get the same amount of money for fights that you were getting. Then you had to take two and three fights, or you got to make sure that you're for sure taking a fight that people want to see and people are going to be willing to pay pay-per-view for, like a Jamal Charlo versus Terence Crawford, or a Terence Crawford Errol Spence, or something like that. But guys like Errol Spence are in a position to do that. I don't know if guys like Terence Crawford are in the position to do that, unless it is, and here I know I'm brainstorming, unless the appetite for boxing, the fans' appetite for boxing gets so severe that they're willing to pay extra money to see these fights and make up for the differences there. But anyway, I thought that was a really good observation from Terence Crawford that kind of gives us a look into some of the difficulties that might take place in making these fights under this new circumstance that we're coming into, that we're in right now in post quarantine. Anyway, it is what it is. You let me know what you think in the comment section. And with that, I'm out. Peace.